what TurboTax Geithner would call the tax or the troubled asset relief program?
Sure.
There was a question about that, the Bloomberg, New Hampshire debate.
Sure.
And my memory of Herman Cain's answer seemed to echo Mitt Romney's in that they both thought that it was okay to begin with, that they supported it, but they thought it was wrongly administered in that they chose certain companies that they would give bailout money to and certain companies they let fail, like Lehman Brothers. And my question to Herman Cain would be, and maybe you could answer it, is how does that answer the moral hazard question? In other words, if the main problem about the bank bailouts was that they took risky bets, and as long as those risky bets paid off, the profits were private. But when the risky bets didn't pay off, all of a sudden that became the taxpayer's problem, and that just encourages more and more risky bets and more bailouts.
Well, I certainly hear the question. Is if you support TARP, are you encouraging this moral hazard problem? The problem that we saw when TARP went through is that we were sitting on what we were told was the verge of an economic collapse. What you're seeing in Greece is what people feared was going to happen to our banks. Mr. Cain certainly did support TARP at the time to prevent that sort of economic collapse. He did have a problem with the way it was implemented and some of those funds being used, for example, in the auto industry to help bail those folks out. You know, he is a big believer in identifying the right problem and then the right solution to attack that problem. But the experts at the time, the economists at the time, were telling us if we don't do this, we may not have a chance to fix the problem, the moral hazard problem. Now, was it implemented incorrectly? Absolutely. Should there have been more strings and conditions implemented? Absolutely. But the last thing we needed as an economy was a complete financial meltdown like Greece, which I think would have been 10 times worse for us. Now, I think you're right. We have to go back and fix those moral hazard problems.
But don't bailouts just create more moral hazard? In other words, I don't think that it was poorly implemented. I think bailouts in and of themselves create moral hazard, and you can't implement them well. You can't administer them perfectly. They in and of themselves are terrible, and they create moral hazard. And if you get in a room and you let experts talk you into something like apparently they did with Iraq and weapons of mass destruction, if you just get in a room and you let experts talk you into things and you don't stand for anything, you'll fall for anything, I think.
Well, I think we learned a lot from that, and you know, and we will go after the right problems.
Okay, you've got 10% up here, but yet it's not really 9%, it's actually 18% that's going to the federal government, correct? Because it's 9% for income tax and 9% for sales tax, both go to the federal government, correct?
Well, right. Yeah, I mean, it's 9.
So why don't we have 18% up there instead of 9? And then my next question is, does that mean we're going to have to pay for houses and big ticket items as well for the federal government when they have a sales tax on houses and closed cars?
New purchases, that is correct.
If it's a new house or a new car, they get 9%.
That is correct.
So tell me how the federal government is cutting spending, because it appears to me that this would be even paying more to the people that are I'm going to say, the middle class and below. They're going to end up paying more.
Remember the point on used purchases. My home purchase was not a new construction purchase. I would not have paid
that way.
9% on
Property
that.
taxes in and of itself, as far as are unconstitutional, but we have to live with them.
Right. Well, but so you wouldn't pay it on that second buyer doesn't pay it on a home.
Of course you have to pay it though. I mean, I'm going back and say, okay, so where are the spending cuts in Washington with you getting this much in return? I mean, I don't see it. I don't understand it. I mean,
Right now you're paying 28% to the federal government every week out of your paycheck.
but
That would be 18.
okay, but then we're also keeping the Social Security and Medicare and all the other little hidden taxes are like in our utilities and all that other stuff. They are going to be there.
No, that's going.
Okay.
That's
But then you're
dealing
collecting
with
on the
tax.
housing market for new houses and new cars, and what's going to be the incentive for people to go out and buy that if they're going to have to pay a tax on top of the price of the house anyway?
What was the new house?
I mean, it's like, why would somebody want to go there unless they're just,
The market is going to determine whether folks want to buy homes, but the cost should come down with a 9% corporate tax.
where's the cuts in government?
Well, and that is another part of our administration. Mr. Kane has said that he's going to get rid of entire programs. One of his debate answers was
Such as?
completely get rid of the EPA and start over.
Amen.
The entire EPA. That might be the next one on the chopping block and start over.
And healthcare bill?
The healthcare bill, immediate repeal, absolutely.
But is it true that is it true with the healthcare bill, is there not a law currently that states that any law that's, or any bill that's passed, if it has any type of impact on a person's tax return, that that bill has to stay in place and be implemented for 1 year, even if it is vetoed and thrown out?
Is there any way you could stand up and speak louder so we can hear what you're saying?
That's not a piece of legislation that I'm aware of, that a taxing bill has to be in a place for a year, even if it's been repealed. That's
I
something.
did ask them in Washington the other day, they said, yes, it is true. But the healthcare bill, if there's any bill out there that's actually introduced and passed initially in Congress, that bill, even if it is sent to the Supreme Court, if it's vetoed, it will actually stay in place for 1 year. If it has an impact on federal taxes, it will stay in place and has to be implemented for 1 year, which means in 2014, everybody in the United States will have to have health care in place, or it will be punishable.
Not if
under
you're
income
Muslim.
taxes. Pardon me?
Not if you're Muslim.
Well,
Well, they're probably right there.
No, if you're Muslim, they're exempt from it.
Are they?
Yeah, it's part of the bill.
Huh.
I haven't heard that, but I mean, if you certainly have something I can look at, that
I could
would
look
be
at
fabulous. But I mean,
Yeah. Page 107, page 107.
go ahead.
If you're gonna have an additional 9% tax on the sale of a new home, I mean, granted, there's gonna be less tax because of other reasons, but this will pinpoint new homes, identified for additional homes. In regards to the used home prices are going to begin to skyrocket, and new homes are gonna stop being built or slow down being built.
Well, I think what it will do is it will get the government out of picking new home construction as a winner. It will let the market, voters, and purchasers decide what industries succeed and fail.
In fact, the government deciding when.
Well, I think it should stabilize the economy by allowing consumers to determine the real value of a home. I mean, a large problem with our current market is that we did have a huge housing bubble. The government was picking the new home industry, asking people to buy new homes, giving them government-backed loans to buy new
And
homes.
they couldn't really afford it.
Not necessarily new homes, that was simply to buy a home.
Well, but what it did is it drove prices of all homes up
Yes.
artificially.
Yes.
And there was this constant buy and sell of homes, trading up in homes, driving values up more. And that's where we got where we are. And so what we would do,
By government interference in the process, which you're suggesting doing again, only this time only aiming at new homes rather than all homes.
what you do is you get rid of it on the used homes to prevent what you would do is you would then start with your market of homes as the current homes out there. And then if the market will demand higher prices, a 9% tax on a new home purchase, then you'll go out. But yeah, I mean, you let the market decide.
In retrospect to your question, I think in essence, having that tax on new homes and no tax on old homes might encourage revitalization in our cities and get rid of these black holes we have and strip malls and things that are completely shut down and everybody's moving out to what's bright lights and new glitz. And that might be in disguise, that may be a good thing.
I'm going to key off of what she was talking about. I heard Mr. Kane talk about retirement homes. Is that going to help inner cities?
That it is an idea of.
We couldn't hear the question.
empowerment zones with the 999 plan, and that would be an inner city situation where you get people back into where there's a large number of homes that nobody wants to purchase. You help with sort of the 9% sales tax in those empowerment zones. Limited numbers, but to help the revitalization of inner cities, absolutely. That is an option to explore under the 999. So.
If I understand it correctly, if the contractor is not paying taxes on materials purchased, that would allow him to drop his prices down, which would possibly offset that 9% sales tax. The new purchase would.
Right, I mean, the idea behind the reduction of the business-to-business taxes would drive the price of the final product down.
Because people are still going to want
Sure.
new things.
Absolutely.
That's human nature.
Exactly.
And if the consumer wants, then the market will set the price and go ahead.
Now, the people have
Absolutely.
plenty of money, let's spend it.
Well, sure, I mean, consumers, of course, will look at the purchase. If you're gonna buy a $100,000 home, and you know you're gonna pay $9,000 in new taxes, then you're gonna go to the builder and say, well, I'm only gonna pay you $93,000, because I really, at the end of the day, only wanna pay you $100,000 for that new home. And so, the market is going, the transparency behind it, you know you're gonna pay 9%, is gonna determine what you pay to purchase that home. And the builder then is gonna look at it and say, well, I can't build a house for 93. And so then you're gonna turn and look at, well, is there a market in that area for used homes? But it should hit an equilibrium. Yes, ma'am?
Will they collect 2 times for the building materials the builder has to go and buy?
No, that was the critical point.
I couldn't hear what he said. Okay.
Business to business taxes are not taxed.
So how do they know that you're going to buy that to build a house? I mean, how's that all gonna be? Never mind.
But the same way that businesses do it now under state tax systems. They sign a paper that says that I'm not the end consumer. And they keep that. And, you know, I mean, you can't completely get rid of the Internal Revenue Service, but you will drastically reduce the size. And you would have to retain those certificates to show that the lumber you purchased to build the home was ultimately paid by a consumer in a new home sales tax scenario.
Can we go from taxes to energy?
Sure.
Governor Perry just recently made a statement regarding what he was going to do about energy. What's Mr. Kane's stand on energy? Is he going to open up some of the permits?
Absolutely. We see energy production as a national security issue. Foreign dependence on oil. President Obama's promising Brazil that will be their best customer is a major problem. We have shale oil, we have natural gas. He'd like to see drilling down in the Gulf.
Amen.
We'd explore drilling up in Alaska, absolutely. Opening up domestic production and being our own best customer before the Middle East or Brazil would be a priority in the administration, absolutely. Yeah, the sands in Canada. Now, of course, that we're trading with our North American neighbors, but I think most of us in the room would probably prefer to trade with Canada before the Middle East.